Hi again then guys, and welcome to the 24th pick out of my top 30 dream car selection for a future Gran Turismo release. And this series, for any who are new to it, is a relatively pie-in-the-sky thing. The actual likelihood of many of these cars getting onto a Gran Turismo game is admittedly very slim. Some of them have a much better chance than others, such as the Ferrari FF, which I featured early on in the series. Others, not so much. This particular model is one of probably the least likely to get into a Gran Turismo game of this entire series. I would still, however, love to see this car featured. And the car is a pretty rare model, pretty obscure, and it's a car which is very easily overlooked within its category for obvious reasons, which we'll get into in a second. But one which really could offer something very cool on Gran Turismo, and a very, very good alternative to some existing vehicles in its particular category. And the car is an Alfa Romeo, and it's called the SE048SP. Not a particularly pretty name from a company known for making pretty cars, but visually it really is a looker. It is, I doubt many people would disagree, a fantastic looking car. It shares some visual styling cues with vehicles like the Toyota TS20 GT1, although that car came later, and also from certain angles vehicles such as the Jaguar XJR9 and Mazda 787B. And that's not surprising, because this model is a Group C Le Mans prototype. It never actually raced though, which is why the majority of people have never heard of it. It unfortunately never passed the development stage. And that is a real shame, because this could have been one of the coolest cars ever seen at the Le Mans, but it never had the chance. Now the car is very interesting mechanically speaking. Specifications and performance are hard to find, because of obviously it never raced, so there's not much to compare it to in the way of speed, and the weight, as far as I'm aware, is unknown. You can bet it's going to be under 900 kilos though, safely, possibly even under 800 for a very specific reason. This car originally was fitted with a 3.5 litre V10 engine, which was originally fitted in a different Alfa Romeo, another absolutely crazy machine which is also very obscure, but still slightly better known than this one, by the name of the Alfa Romeo 164 V10 Pro car. Essentially, Alfa Romeo took their 164 saloon and turned it into an absolutely gutted, stripped to the bare bones V10 powered super touring car, essentially. But that vehicle was just a test car, and they decided to use that same engine, which puts out roughly 620 horsepower at just over 13,000 RPM, into this Group C prototype. Later on, however, that engine was removed for various reasons, and it was refitted with a Ferrari-sourced 3.5 litre V12, producing 680 horsepower instead of 620 at just under 13,000 RPM instead of just over. So a slightly lower revving engine, slightly more accessible power band, and although we can't say for sure, you can bet probably a little bit more torque as well. So we don't know the weight, but it's highly likely that it was lower than 900 kilos, well below, I would guess, possibly even lower than 800. And as I said, I would allude to the reason why I believe that. The reason why I believe that is compare it to the closest thing on Gran Turismo. The closest thing to this car mechanically, and in terms of age and its overall package, is the Peugeot 905. That car also has a 3.5 litre V10, and it's the lightest Group C Le Mans car, or Le Mans car overall, in the game. This car stands a pretty good chance of not weighing that much more than that Alfa Romeo, being a very similar machine mechanically and also in terms of the regulations that it had to meet. potentially this Alfa Romeo could have been a very significant rival in terms of straight line performance and top speed to vehicles like the XJR9. And one of the reasons why we can say that that was probably the case is because of the visual design of the car. It has a longer body style than some other Group C prototypes, and in some cases it has covered rear wheels, like, again, the XJR9 and various other extremely fast Group C prototypes. Now, unfortunately, we can't say for sure how quick it was, and at roughly 620 or 680 horsepower, dependent on the engine, it's far from being the most powerful of Group C cars. In practice, we could assume safely that this would be somewhat more like a Peugeot 905 or to some degree the Ferrari F333SP, which also isn't featured on GranTurismo, in that it's more of a low-end and mid-range Group C car rather than a pure top-end Group C machine. Top-end Group C cars tend to be vehicles like the Sauber C9, the XJR9, vehicles like that, Porsche's 962 Longtail, vehicles which have huge turbos and massive top-end performance. But they also tend to be a little bit heavier than the others, and a little bit more sluggish low-end. Other vehicles, such as the 787B, the 905, and probably this Alfa Romeo, are more rev-happy. Their power is much higher rev range, less torque, less weight, and like to be driven harder at lower speeds. A little bit more twitchy in terms of handling, louder, generally a higher pitched exhaust note, and good for tracks such as Monaco or city circuits in general. We can safely assume that this Alfa Romeo would have probably been that type of vehicle. It unfortunately never got the chance to prove itself in the Le Mans, but there are other vehicles on GranTurismo already which didn't prove themselves in various ways, which we still get the opportunity to use. The Minolta, as an example. The Toyota Minolta 88CV race car. That is also a Group C machine, but contrary to what many people would assume, it actually never ran in the Le Mans. So technically speaking, that's a car which never achieved that. This vehicle never achieved racing either. That car did race to some degree, just not in the Le Mans itself. This car didn't race at all. So there is a precedent for having vehicles which didn't necessarily achieve everything that they could have feature on the game. Now, as for sourcing the vehicle, that might be a little bit more difficult, getting the car into Polyphony's hands for mapping the sound, etc. But it's possible. They've done it before for rare vehicles, one-off vehicles, vehicles which are hard to source. And if we were to have this car in the game, I would love that opportunity for a variety of reasons. For one thing, it would provide a perfect rival for the 787B and the 905B, because there aren't really that many Le Mans cars of a Group C or LMP category that provide them with real straight-up opposition. The Le Mans cars that we have on the game are pretty good. We do have a strong selection, but the majority of them are mid-range and especially top-end performers, such as the Sauber, the Pascalos, etc. They are very much top-end happy machines. We don't have that many low-end machines such as the 787Bs and the 905s, and this Alfa Romeo could potentially do that very well and possibly even bridge the gap between the two. Because there aren't actually that many Le Mans cars on GranTurismo which are genuinely good for the whole package. Most are mainly good at low-end speed or mainly good at high-end speed. There are very few which are genuinely good at both. There are some, such as the R92CP, but in general, not that many. They tend to be good at specific things rather than in general. And this Alfa Romeo, depending on how it was rendered into the game, could potentially provide a really good amount of both. In terms of tuning potential, I don't personally think it would ever be among the fastest of Le Mans cars on the game. It just doesn't have that kind of power. If we were allowed to turbocharge it, as we are with many of the other Le Mans cars on the game, you could potentially put some serious power out of it. It's running similar power to something like a 787B, a little bit less. So you could potentially run the mid to high 900 horsepower region, maybe a little bit more even. Top speed wise, you're looking at definitely 270 if not more based on the existing Le Mans car's performance on Gran Turismo 6. The acceleration would doubtless be very good, the throttle response would be superb from such a high revving engine. And to be honest, regardless of whether we got the V10 or the V12 version, either would be an awesome engine to have. The V12 is the obvious better of the two. It's larger, it's more powerful, it's more efficient technically, it produces more power at a lower rev, which means you have more accessible performance, it's more performance efficient. But the V10 would still be awesome, because there aren't many of those. As far as how it would fit into the game, in terms of PP, price, effectiveness, well, for effectiveness we can't really say. We can assume that it would probably be quite good. It's definitely going to be quick, we know that. Certainly the quickest Alfa Romeo track car in the game, no doubt about that whatsoever. It would be nice to be able to represent Alfa Romeo in the Le Mans class, considering just how cool a car it is. In terms of PP, I should think you could easily get this well over 700. Definitely, probably around 710 if not more. Stock PP, no idea. Probably around 660, 670, maybe even more. In terms of price, it's kind of hard to say. Most of the Le Mans cars on the game tend to hover around the 2 million credit category. Some are a bit less at 1.9, some even less again, some are a bit more. So I would say maybe a price tag of, say, 2.25 million or 2.75, something like that. Maybe 2.6-ish million to put it on par with, say, the Stealth 787B, the Sauber C9, that kind of thing. That would seem a roughly appropriate price for this car. As I said at the top of the episode, it pretty much is definite that this car won't end up on Gran Turismo, unfortunately. But I would personally absolutely love to see this car feature. I think it's one of the best looking Le Mans cars ever made. It manages to be almost a bridge between GT1 and Group C styling, although at the time they couldn't have known that. And it would be nice to, as I said, be able to represent more Italian teams in the Le Mans category. Alfa Romeo, of course, being the primary one in this case. But that's it overall for this particular pick. If you are new to the channel, then of course feel free to slap down below in the comments what dream car you would love to see feature on Gran Turismo, maybe more than one vehicle. But that's it overall for this particular pick, so I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.